Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Coin. I have Savannah on the pod with me today. Hey, Savannah.
Hello. Happy to
Yeah.
be here.
I'm so excited we're doing this because Savannah is part of our Factora community. She took her Wealth Circle when?
Fall 2022.
Okay. And she then came back into the Slack community a while later and shared a post about her micro wedding, which is what we're going to get into today. So I wanted to just open up and get right into what you posted in Slack that we just knew we had to talk about. So without further ado, this is what Savannah came into the community to say. Hey, Factora ladies, I'm excited to share a wedding related money win, as I know there has been a lot of chatter around the affordability or lack thereof of weddings. My fiance and I were really struggling to come up with a wedding plan that aligned with our values. Even having a smaller wedding in California was going to cost a minimum of 30K, and we just couldn't justify spending that kind of money on a party when we're trying to save to buy our first home. One of our core spending values is that we prefer to spend money on experiences over things. So we decided to do a destination micro wedding in Japan with just our immediate families. The end result was absolutely incredible. We spent over a week in Japan exploring Tokyo and Mount Fuji with our families and found an amazing local company that helped us plan a picture perfect wedding with stunning photography and videography. Despite traveling halfway across the globe, staying in luxury accommodations, and working with a professional wedding planner, we ended up spending just under 10K for a week long adventure and then spent another 2 weeks exploring Japan, just the two of us, for our honeymoon. For anyone considering a micro wedding or elopement, I cannot recommend this enough. Creating a magical, unique experience without breaking the bank is 100% worth it, and we couldn't be happier with the end result. Uh, I mean, I know that this Slack post that you came into the Factora community and wrote in our Money Wins channel, which is everyone's favorite, got so much engagement, and I'm not surprised that it did because we were talking about this before we started the episode. A lot of pressure comes into play when there's a wedding to prepare for, especially as women. And I think your message came in a moment where a ton of women wanted to share that they had similar feelings. The whole breaking the bank by spending 30,000 plus in a day, if it doesn't align with your values, here's some validation that you don't have to do it. I didn't do it, and I loved that I didn't in the end. So, that is what this episode is about. We're going to break it all down. But yeah, I just wanted to give some insight because we don't really share what goes on in our Factora community that much. And that's a perfect example of this might not sound exactly like a money win. You know, other things in that channel are very um, obvious money wins. I fully funded my IRA this month. That's awesome. That is something towards your financial future. But what is less talked about is the opportunity cost of spending
Mhm.
something in one place and not being able to save or invest or do other goals because of it. All right. So, can you tell us who you are, where you are speaking to me from, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, awesome. I'm Savannah Barker. I am calling in from Los Angeles, where I literally just moved a few weeks ago. So happy to call LA my new home. And I am currently working as the chief of staff at a recruiting tech company called Untapped. That's really kind of focused on connecting Gen Z and early career talent to big kind of tech finance companies. So that's my world right now.
And tell me a little bit more about when you took the Wealth Circle and what led you to taking the Wealth Circle.
Yeah. So it actually started like almost a year before I joined the Wealth Circle. I've been following y'all for a minute. I have wanted to join for a while, but I think I kind of had my own narratives in my head about
We
like,
all do. We
I
all do.
really ready for this. I don't think I'm good with money. And I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who we also were work colleagues. We both worked together at the same nonprofit back in the day. So I knew how much money she made. And we were having a conversation because she got furloughed, like a lot of people did during the pandemic. And she shared with me that she had saved up $20,000 before the pandemic hit. So when she was furloughed, she was fine. Like she was okay. She was able to keep her apartment. And that was stunning to me because by this point, I had moved out of nonprofit, moved into tech. I was making significantly more in terms of my salary, but I did not have a savings. And I had about $20,000 in credit card debt that I'd amassed while living similar to you, while living in New York. And so it was just this sort of like aha moment for me because I was like, okay, here's a person. I know how much she makes. It's not a lot, but she was still able to set aside enough money over time that she had this $20,000 basically emergency fund, right? And here I am, someone who's making pretty good money, who, if I lost my job tomorrow, I would be in a much more precarious financial position. So I started with the six-figure savings course because I felt like I just needed to sort of dig myself out of the hole first and then go from there. And then I also read a book that was recommended to me by a friend called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. Also awesome. Very, very similar types of philosophy to the six-figure savings course. And it really kind of blew my mind open. I've always had my own narratives. I've told myself that I'm not good with money because I'm not frugal. And I feel like I got a lot of the same type of financial advice from my parents and other people around me that was some version of like, you know, count every dollar and don't buy lattes and right, like, it's just sort of
For
this
sure.
all these things that you shouldn't be doing, basically. That was sort of how
Right.
I was hearing this money advice, and I was like, "Well, I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna live like that. I don't want money to control my life in that way." I'm someone who I love to eat out. I love to travel. I love to have these kinds of experiences. And so, how can I come up with a sort of money plan that allows me to live my life while also saving for my future? And I felt like six-figure savings really kind of unlocked that for me with this concept of automation in particular, right? Like money now that comes out of my paycheck before I even see it. Like I don't even see it. It goes into a completely separate account. I'd never even thought to have separate accounts, but the psychology of that really, really is real. And within about 6 months post taking that course, I was out of credit card debt, paid it off completely, have no
Love
credit
it.
debt, feels amazing. And I had about $20,000, had saved $20,000 in savings. So that was just really exciting because I was like, okay, like this is something that's doable, that's real. It didn't take me years and years and years to get there. I just had to be really kind of disciplined and set up these different systems, and I started to see results. And so by that point, I was like, okay, now I think I'm ready for Wealth Circle to kind of go to the next level and really start stepping into the somewhat scary world of investing that was so unfamiliar to me outside of maybe real estate investing, just because my parents are in real estate. So I was just sort of like, okay, I want to learn more. I'm excited. And that's what brought me to the Wealth Circle in fall of 2022.
Okay, I wanna tap into a few of those things because first of all, your story is my story, which
Right.
means a lot of more women out there have this story, and I really related to you saying that the advice was basically be frugal
Mhm.
or you're bad with money. Like,
Yep.
if you don't know what every dollar is doing and you're not being smart with your down to the cent, like, if
Yeah.
you don't know how to save a penny, then you're bad with money, and that's definitely not true, but that is a lot of the messaging
Mhm.
out there in the ether, and that can keep you from getting started because you already feel imperfect or behind. So, one, I love that you found the Factor six-figure savings course and Ramit because you're
Yeah.
right. We are both kind of like, you can absolutely do this. Like, don't let the world tell you that this is hard because that's what they want.
Yeah.
Financial industry wants it to seem so not doable.
Mhm.
Rely on us.
Yeah.
Give
Yes.
us a cut. Don't pay attention. Stay in your lane. It's too complicated for you. It's like, it's not that complicated. But one thing I love about Ramit's teachings, and I don't know if you saw this, but he's about to get a Netflix show.
did not see that. Wow.
Literally, let's go.
I stand. I will watch it.
Oh, I will too. Oh, for sure. He has something called Your Rich Life, and it's very similar to Factora's values-based spending.
Yep.
I think budgeting is way too restrictive, and it's really easy to kind of purge and binge, right? Like, you
Yeah,
just
it's like
get rid of everything, and then you feel
really
so
yeah.
outside of being able to do anything fun that you say, "Screw it," and you just go
Uh-huh.
hard. And then it's just back and forth. It's a yo-yo diet,
E
basically.
exactly, exactly.
It's just not effective in the long run, and that's the same thing with raw meat. I remember one of his, for lack of a better word, rich life or values was always spend on education. So any book or course he wants,
Yep.
he's not too worried about the price. And same thing with hors d'oeuvres at a restaurant. He
Yeah.
felt like when he went
Mhm.
out to meals as a kid, he was only allowed to get the entree and it couldn't be too expensive and blah, blah, blah. And all these parameters that made him not enjoy the experience. So now his rich life is I'm not worried about getting the appetizer or the meal. I'm gonna enjoy it. And he does. And so I mean, that kind of builds perfectly into what ended up happening with your wedding. But before we talk about the type of wedding you did have, I'm interested to know growing up if you had a vision for what you thought a wedding might look like for you in the future.
Know that I did. I mean, I think probably like most people, right? There's sort of this societal idea of what a wedding is supposed to look like, and it's a big celebration, and you have all your family there and your friends there. But my parents, who've been married for over 30 years, like they got married, like they basically eloped and got married in Las Vegas, like wearing leather, very 80s, like pink hair, just awesome, like the coolest wedding pictures ever. And so I kind of had that as an example. And I think they always sort of model this idea of like, it's about a life together, not one day.
Mm,
And, yes, we didn't have this sort of traditional version of a wedding, but we had something that was true to us. And we're still married and we're happy and everything's all good. So I definitely didn't feel like I had pressure from like parents or immediate family to have some certain version of a wedding. But I also grew up, I feel like when Pinterest was like really blowing up and, I would definitely go down the rabbit hole on Pinterest, like, oh, this looks pretty and this looks cool. And maybe I would have this in my wedding.
did
So
you have a Pinterest wedding board?
I did for sure.
I did too. I did too. I that was one of the first boards I got on Pinterest. I privatized my wedding board and just threw stuff in there as I thought it was
Oh,
pretty.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I also got a dream house board, like, I got a bunch of dream boards right with Pinterest.
I feel like that's I feel like that's everyone, and I definitely was in that boat. But it was funny because even in my Pinterest, I would see like the evolution of my it's been weddings over the
Yep.
years. You're like, oh, I wanted to do that. Like, oh no, I'm glad I'm glad I didn't do that. So so yeah.
Okay, so then let's get into it because I think, you created a really beautiful wedding that was quite intentional, and you call it a micro wedding,
Mhm.
which I had actually not really heard that term, although it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is it micro because it's a small amount of people, or is it micro because it's small cost, all of it?
I think it's mostly small amount of people because it's not an elopement because like we had our parents there, right?
Got it.
And so I think micro wedding, I think usually will refer to something even as big as like it could be like 50 people.
Okay.
I've heard referred to as a micro wedding, but this was like a real micro. This was 8 of us total. So this was a micro
Total including you and your husband,
me and my
8 guests.
husband. So both sets of parents and then my sister and her fiance. And that was it.
Wow. Alright, set it up. How did you get into, this micro wedding and end up in Japan?
Yeah. Yeah. So like what I said in the post, my husband and I were kind of talking about what we wanted to do for a wedding. We are getting engaged. What do we want to do for a wedding? And one of our core values that has always been true is this idea of spending money on experiences over things. That is a big thing for us, whether it's like birthdays, like our birthdays are 2 weeks apart. So we almost always will just be like, let's just do like a trip together. Like we don't need to buy each other random things. Let's just do a trip anniversaries, Valentine's Day, you name it. Like let's go to a concert, let's go have a great dinner. Like we just love experiences. And so thinking about a wedding, I think we were thinking about it in similar terms where we just wanted this to be an experience that was really true to us. And then I think another, I don't know if this is a value, but more of a characteristic of my husband and I is like, we're just like very unique people. Like we never do anything just because it's what everyone's doing or because it's a tradition. Like we question traditions all the time. And if anything, the more unique, the more different, the more out of the box, the better. So I think we established early on that, we didn't want to do something that was sort of the norm, I guess. But where we started, like I was saying, was like, okay, what if we did something that was like a little smaller, 50-ish people, mix of family, friends, something in California, like local, like in our minds, we're like, this will be nothing. This will be small. And when we started looking into it seriously, I started talking to friends and family who'd recently gotten married to get a sense of like, hey, how much did you spend on your wedding? Are you comfortable sharing that? And I was just stunned by the results. I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I mean, like, the on the lowest end was $40,000, which was a wedding. It was a beautiful, awesome wedding, but I mean, it was like a venue that'd never done a wedding before. They didn't have flower like, right? Like, it really was like a sort of quote unquote "budget" wedding. It was still $40,000. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I had folks I talked to who spent over 6 figures on their wedding, and I just couldn't contemplate spending that amount of money on one day for kind of a number of reasons. One is we're saving to buy our first home for the down payment on a house. We live in Los Angeles, very expensive, very competitive real estate market. We're looking to spend, honestly, probably a minimum of $1 million on our first home, which is wild to say out loud, but that's what it is here. So the idea of kind of pushing out the timeline on getting to move into a home to have a big party, just like it just didn't make sense for us. And then I just feel like there's so much pressure put on a wedding, and I feel like if you spent that amount on a single day, like, I just felt like there's no way that could live up to expectations. I don't know. I Even if it was amazing, it goes by so fast. Every bride I've ever talked to is like, "Oh my god, it went by so fast. I wish I got to kind of savor it more." And then at the end of the day, you spent, tens of thousands of dollars on again, in our case, we were really trying to, like, think small, think budget friendly, and it just wasn't looking possible or not within, sort of what we were comfortable with. So, we started talking about having a destination wedding. And the reason that we landed on Japan is Japan had some like special meeting for us as a couple. We were supposed to go right at the beginning of the pandemic. And obviously we're not able to go because the pandemic happened. And so it was this trip that we kept postponing. Like we were supposed to go in 2020, postponed to 2021. Japan had very strict basically kept their borders closed compared to most other countries, so they still weren't open in 2021, so we moved it to 2022, like, I think it was spring 2022, and they still were not open by spring
Wow.
22. So we moved it to fall 2022, and by then we're like, "Okay, if they're not open by now, like, this is the universe is telling us this isn't gonna happen, and we'll figure something else out." But we got very lucky. They opened, I think, September of 2022. We got married November 2nd, 2022, so just barely made it. And I had actually never been to Japan. My husband has been several times, probably close to a dozen times, and he just felt confident that I would really love Japan, and really kind of feel at home there, and he was totally right. He knows me well. Japan is a beautiful country. They really kind of turn everything into an art form, like, that's I think he said that even in his vows when speaking about Japan, and so it's a really special, beautiful country, and again, something a little bit different. We'd both done Europe, we'd both done Italy and France and these other beautiful places, but Japan just felt unique enough and kind of, again, true to us as a couple. So that's how we landed on Japan. And then my husband had actually been, it's kind of funny, but he had basically been planning a surprise wedding in Japan, which is like, I know, what? That's not what people do. Uh, he had been sort of planning in the background, like a surprise wedding in Japan. So he had actually already found a wedding planner, already found a venue. And then obviously, like, you can't really have a surprise wedding totally Like, eventually, you have to kinda read the other person in that this is happening. So, we had a night together where I remember I think I actually said it where I said out loud, I was like, "What if we just got married in Japan?" And he was like, "Well, I've been planning a wedding in Japan. Now you're in on the surprise. We need to go find you a dress. Like, let's do it." So yeah, so that's sort of how we landed on Japan, worked with a local wedding planner there who 37 frames, 2 women from Australia who live in Japan. Absolutely incredible, incredible humans, like, could not recommend them enough, like, really honored our budget and understood that, like, we have a strong, very tight budget that we cannot go over, and just, like, went above and beyond to make it such a beautiful, special day for us, even though it was something that was so small, right, in context of when you think of a wedding. So,
I
yeah.
have so many questions.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I am blown away by your husband. I need to know more about him. Why has he been to Japan a dozen times? And how cool, I don't even think that word does it justice, kind of back end maneuvering the wedding until it was the right moment to bring it up to you and you were gung ho. I mean,
Yeah.
that's someone who obviously knows you very well.
Yeah.
But no, I've never heard the phrase surprise wedding because to your point, you got to have both people
Yeah.
involved
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. Really not a thing. I think the wedding planner, it sounds like initially was kind of like, "Are you sure?
He
Oh,
doesn't know.
you're
You
sure
sure she's gonna
what?"
like all this?
She was like, "I think you are gonna have to read her in at some point." So it didn't get to be a surprise forever, obviously, which I think was good. But he really did do, I would say, probably 90% of the work, 90% of the plan. He, again, found the venue, found the hotel that we ended up staying at. He was the one who was coordinating with the planner almost exclusively leading up to the wedding. I think I, like, would chime in here and there on, like, little things, like, "What do you want your bouquet to look like?" And just stuff like that. But, I'm lucky in that I trusted him, and trusted his taste and knew, okay, he has good taste. He knows me. This will be really beautiful and special. And it really was. So I got lucky.
I love it. Okay. So, as you were saying, the whole we wanted to go to Japan and then COVID crushed those dreams for a few
Yeah.
years. I was thinking about myself and my husband. We
Mhm.
were also not married at the time and put a trip on for Africa. I have always wanted to go to
Oh,
Africa. My
or
biggest problem is that I want to go everywhere in Africa, and you
yeah.
can't do that in a trip unless you're going to take 6 months
You're
to a
gonna keep
year
places
off.
really small. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always really stressful because 'cause I'm like, I have to go to Lagos. I have to go to Kenya. Wait, but I need to go to Morocco. Like, how can I get it all done? So basically, I've never been to Africa, and this opportunity came up to go to a reserve that's eh, focused on saving white rhinos.
Oh,
And it just all fell into place, and we were like, "This is the trip. We're going." And I remember when they were showing us the kind of the deck with the
yeah.
different pictures and what we would be doing on the trip, there was going to be a vineyard that we visited in Johannesburg
Yeah.
before we went to the reserve. And I remember thinking to myself, how cool would it be if we got married on that trip? Like if we were just like, hey, we're with this stranger group of people, you're going to witness us getting married in this little vineyard before we go to a reserve and see literally dinosaurs, you know?
What?
So, COVID crushed those dreams. We
Yeah.
extended that trip, and then ultimately got married in Austin and then had a baby, and now we're not really in the phase to go to Africa, but, I'm so glad that your Japanese dreams were fulfilled, that you did have your wedding there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Would you mind breaking down the cost for us? So you said that the micro wedding for 8 people for a week was under 10K. What were you spending on what? What were the costs? What were the priorities?
Yeah. So for us, the number one priority was photography and videography. Like, number one, far and away. For me, I felt like having a beautiful wedding video and having beautiful wedding photos, like, those are things you can share forever, right? Those are things you share with generation. And because we were doing a micro wedding, having a video that included our vows that we could then share with friends and family was really important to us. And that ended up being something really cool, right? All these folks that we do still really love that are in our lives, that weren't with us physically in Japan, could kind of share in at least some part of our wedding. So those were our top priorities. And the wedding planning company that we worked with basically specialized in photography. That's like what they do above all else. So the wedding planner um, cost $4,000, which included photography, transportation, travel for their entire team, which I think was like 10 people. We were joking that their
Wow.
team was bigger than our wedding party because they had like
Wow.
multiple photographers, videographers. They had a person operating a drone. Like it was wild. I felt like we were celebrities. I think people just we thought we were celebrities because we had people just following us taking pictures. So 4,000 for that. It was about another 2,500 for the extended video with the full vows that we ended up getting. The accommodations, like, we stayed in the most stunning hotel I've ever seen in my life, on the edge of, a lake looking at Fuji. Every hotel room had, like, a private, natural hot spring, so, like,
Oh
basically,
my gosh.
jacuzzi, like, it was just a dream, and we were in the sort of presidential suite, if you will, at this hotel. So we were there for 3 nights, and I think that was around 2,500. And then hair and makeup ended up being another bigger cost because, we didn't just do me, we did, like, all the ladies. So I think that was around 1,500, and then that's pretty much it. I think that the venue, the sort of ceremony where we got married was actually a public park that nobody had ever gotten married at before. Mars discovered yeah, explored it through, like, I'm pretty sure, like, Google mapping around. It's this beautiful shrine to Mount Fuji, so it's sort of up on a hill. It's this sort of red, very traditional Japanese-looking shrine, and Mount Fuji is behind it. So that was great because then we didn't have to pay to, like, create, a flower arch or anything like that. We just showed up and it was stunning. And it was a public park, right? So it wasn't some, like, fancy venue that we had to pay a ton of money to have a wedding there. I think it was like 500 or $700 to just sort of reserve this part of the park for an hour and a half. Um, but yeah, that those were kind of the bigger expenses, and then the rest of the time we just got to spend in Japan. We had our families flew in. We all flew into Tokyo first. So we got a couple days just exploring Tokyo together, and then we took the train Fuji. We had, a day to sort of explore that area, and then we had the wedding, and then we parted ways with our family. Some family members stayed. My sister and her fiance went to Kyoto and kind of spent a couple more days in Japan. And then my husband and I, we spent the rest of we spent 2 weeks basically having our honeymoon exploring other parts of Japan. So, um, yeah, it was pretty
Oh my gosh, I love it. This is such a cool story. Um, well, so you decided not to drop, and by the way, I looked up the current average cost of a US or an American wedding as of 2022 was 30,000. That's a lot of money when you call that an average.
yeah.
The average credit card debt of an American household is around 30,000, so, yeah, saying, just saying. Um, but that is a lot of money to drop in a day, especially if that can be a big component of a down payment for
Mhm.
a home you wanna live in for many a years to come.
Yes.
So, I guess talk to me a little bit about other financial goals or just the kind of financial considerations that really helped you choose the amount that you wanted to spend on your wedding, and I love that you said you had wedding planners that respected your budget because you also hear that a lot, that, you start with one budget and then you increase it by
They
30%.
threw in free stuff for us, which was really sweet. Like, for example, like a wedding cake, we're like, "We don't even like cake. We don't need it's 8 of us. We don't need a wedding cake. We don't care about." And, our wedding randomly, our wedding day, November 2nd, is also my husband's birthday, and they found that out, and they were like, "What? You didn't tell us." And so they ended up getting us a gorgeous wedding cake/birthday cake that matched my bouquet for free. We did not pay for it, just because they were wonderful, amazing human.
Oh,
Um,
so sweet. They're like, "Okay, you don't like wedding cake, but you never said you don't like birthday cake."
so yes, that was they were amazing, and they again, they specialize in videography and photography, and they also do specialize in sort of destination micro wedding. So I think I'm sure that a lot of folks that they work with, mm, I don't know, probably have similar goals around not overspending if they can avoid it.
I also just have this visual because when you said your wedding, including you and your husband, were 8 people,
And
and their team was more like 10
yeah,
people, and that you felt like celebrities. I'm like, yeah, if there's 10 people encircling you, it probably looks like you had a posse.
I know it really did. It was very fun. And they were great because they knew all the spots. Like we got had our sort of ceremony and then we sort of did a few photos around the area in Mount Fuji. And we were so lucky because it was fall and the trees had just turned red, like just that brilliant bright red. I think going back to the question about what I imagined for my wedding, I think one thing I did imagine is I knew I wanted a fall wedding. I love
Mm.
fall, I love the reds and the oranges and all those colors. And we just got so lucky because the planner kept telling us, "Hey, it usually doesn't turn red until later in November, so you're probably not gonna have that photos." Like, I just wanna set expectation. And I guess you know, the stars aligned in our favor, but fall came early, around Fuji, so we got just these stunning, stunning shots of just red on red on red leaves. We got photos in a Japanese garden. They really kind of rolled out the red carpet to basically go around this tiny little town outside Mount Fuji and find like the most photogenic, uh, if you will, that they took us to kind of have this little photo shoot after our wedding. Yeah, I forgot your question.
Me too, me too. I have such a visual of you and the shrine and your posse and
And the
then
po-
getting photos with your family all over this town with the red brilliance.
yes,
It's just
yeah,
you've really set the stage well. I think I was asking you about financial goals because that's
yeah.
what I always ask about on this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. So, for us, big financial goal has been buying our first home. That's huge for me. Again, like I mentioned earlier, both my parents are in real estate. Like I come from like a real estate family where everyone buy a house as soon as you can. And it's just been one of those just like lifelong dreams of mine is to buy my first home. And I'm doing it in Los Angeles. And so I had to just be really real with myself about like, okay, like this is I'm gonna have to save up way more than maybe I would have expected. That's okay. Like this is my life. I can do this and I know I can do this. So beginning of I guess it was beginning of 2022, after I'd sort of gotten myself out of debt and got myself into the positive, I started being really aggressive about growing our savings. So I sold my car there's 2 of us, we work remote, like, we don't need 2 cars, and at the time, like, used cars were going for way more than
Mhm.
full, so I was like, "I'm gonna jump on this, and I'm gonna sell my car." So I sold my car, got about $20,000 for my, like, 6-year-old Honda. Wild. I started putting almost 50% of my paycheck towards savings because I could afford to do that, and I was very aware of what we talk about in, Wealth Circle, like, the concept of, like, lifestyle creep of just because you're making more doesn't mean you need to start spending more, and, if I just never saw the money, like, if it never even hit my bank account, no, this is how much I have to play with, I could stay within that. Whereas if I see that bigger number, like, I just think psychologically, then I'm gonna spend closer to that bigger
Well,
number.
and psychologically, you're right because it's something called Parkinson's law.
Mhm.
It's basically the idea of how goldfish will stay a certain size
Yeah.
in a certain fish bowl, but if it's a bigger bowl, it will grow more.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's the same thing with our bank accounts. Like we will expand or contract to the size of our bank account. So one of the biggest things we teach in Factora is so don't have everything sitting in your bank account. Open up
Exactly.
a savings account, opening up investment accounts, making sure that you are getting money in and
Yes.
immediately moving it out so that you don't spend it.
Yeah.
And the biggest difference between millionaires and people who aren't doing a good job of building wealth is millionaires pay themselves first. They are their first priority
Yes.
before they pay vendors and people who
Yes.
take your money, right? Like they don't exchange their money to someone else before they make sure it is saved and invested for themselves. So I love that you got your savings rate up to
Oh, yeah.
50%
Oh,
because
yeah.
I know some people are listening like, "Pfft, I can't do that." You
Yeah.
can. I have seen so many people do this. It's really, really
Yeah.
wild. But okay, wait. So where are you at now? How much you got saved? How are you doing on your
We're
goal?
at about 90,000.
Heck yes.
In our future fund, we have that was another thing I think I learned from Wealth Circle is, like, we have multiple savings accounts that have names, which is, like,
Yep.
really, again, psychological.
Powerful. Yep.
I do not tou we do not touch the future, like, it does not matter. But we call it our future fund, it's about our future, like, we do not touch it, and we will not touch it. And then I have an emergency fund, which is great glass in case of emergency. And then I have what I just call, like, a flex fund, which is basically when I run up my Amex a little higher than expected, that's the pool I can dip in to kind of cover whatever I might have overspent. Like, if I have a particularly busy travel month or like I'm planning my sister's bachelorette, so it's like just spending a little bit more money than normal, that's the fund I dip into. Because in the past, I had a savings account, but anytime, like, I would just dip into it constantly. I'd be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll just borrow from here." So now it's like I've sort of tiered it out where, like, future fund never gets touched. Emergency fund is there for emergency, right? If there's a real thing, a medical thing or something like that. And then this sort of like flex fund, which I keep pretty small, but that's just sort of like a oopsies, I spent a little too much this.
Yep.
I'll dip into this fund and then next month I'll make sure I replenish it. So I still kind of keep myself within these certain boundaries.
We have that too. We have we literally just call it our overdraft, and we put a little bit extra in there, and then on the occasion when the monthly nut is higher than it's supposed to be,
Yep,
we just pull from there because we don't ever wanna touch
yep,
any of our goals. And to your point about naming your goals, it really is powerful because now you know what the future fund means to you.
yep.
So you're not gonna mess with your own future, but if you don't have a checking account and you just have a savings account, it's this constant
Yes,
draw a little bit, feel bad, but don't know how to make a change, and there's a big psychological shift that happens when you name your accounts.
yes, totally. And they're different banks. They're priced for my savings, and I think we use our joint checking is so high. So there's like different, like it's also like kind of a not a pain, it's not a pain, but like to transfer funds from a bank to a bank, like takes a second, right? Like it's just a little bit more inconvenient.
Yeah, friction. It's really great.
Yeah, yeah, it's
You
great.
gotta think about it twice. Do I really need to do this?
Yeah,
Because do I wanna wait 48 hours or could I live without it?
exactly, exactly.
Okay, well, very exciting. Do you have a target date for when you guys are buying your LA home?
Hopefully beginning of next year is kind of what we're looking for. We actually we were looking pretty seriously at the end of last year post wedding. And actually put an offer in on a few houses, but the market still it's just still weird enough. The interest rates and the home prices haven't quite corrected to the
Yep,
we would want them to. And we just didn't want to overpay for a home that might depreciate value fairly quickly. So we kind of decided, you know what? We're good. We
no
still
rush.
have money, no rush. We don't have kids yet. We're just like, what is it? Double income, no kids, just like happy married people enjoying our happy married life. And we'll get into a home when yeah, when it makes sense and when we find the right home that feels like the right price. Cause I think it's just so easy to overpay for a home out here. So
And almost anywhere.
well, that's true. Yeah.
It's really easy to overpay because you can get qualified for way more than
Yes.
you I don't wanna say should because there are no shoulds. There are what works for you,
Should
but often
was baffled at what we
yeah.
I was like, "In what world would this?" I don't know, it blew my mind. I had no idea because I'm like, "We make good money," but, like, the whatever, the monthly payment that we qualified for was so high. I was like, "There" I was like, "I guess we could do that and, like, survive, but, like, that's about it." Like, we couldn't do
Yeah, so
house
So you'd probably end up being what they call house poor,
house
which
flip.
is that the majority of your income gets spent on your home. And there was this quote I saw one time. I don't remember who said it, so sorry. But I loved it so much. It was basically like the American dream has turned into affording a house so that you can go to a job in order to afford the house that sits there
Yeah.
all your stuff in it. And I was like, "Whoa." I mean, at least most of us are sitting in our house and enjoying it now with remote work, but before I was like, "That's That is really wild. It's basically our own storage facility, and then we're out working to make sure we
Right.
can afford it. And for some people, it's hard to afford beyond that because they really do slam themselves with a big house payment, and
Yeah.
that can be really difficult.
Oh, yeah.
But you sound like you guys are pretty square on what you're doing,
Ye
so I can't wait to hear how the house goals proceed. I guess just to wrap this episode, I'd love to know after throwing this micro wedding, is there anything that you would have done differently or maybe even an area that you thought you overspent in or maybe underspent in?
I don't think there's anything I would have done differently. I think the only area we spent money in, I just, like, literally didn't like, flowers, like, I just had no idea how expensive flowers are, and we just got a bouquet and a boot we didn't do everyone no one else had flowers, we didn't have flowers on tables, we didn't have flower arch, and I guess I had asked for orchids, which, like, were not in season or something, and so it was
And organs flown in from New Zealand or something?
apparently and so it was just really interesting because it was sort of included in that big sort of wedding planner, fee that we had, but I think flowers ended up being like $750 for 2
Wow.
bouquets, and I think in retrospect, it was just like I just don't know anything about flowers, and I think
Yeah,
I didn't actually care that much, like, it's a bouquet, you're not gonna remember you I don't know, I don't really care about it. It was beautiful, but, like, it's a bouquet. So, in retrospect, I think I would have maybe just been, "Oh, just use, local flowers," like, that's, like, the
yeah,
sort of affordable way to do it. I didn't spend money on things like shoes. Like I know a lot of women will spend money on like really beautiful sort of sparkly shoes, which I understand, but like no one sees your feet. Like you're wearing a long dress. So I was like, I have white shoes. I'll just wear the white shoes I have. But no, I don't know. I really don't have any like I really would not have done it
any
any
differently.
yeah. And I feel
I
lucky
love
to
it.
say that.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's what I would want anyone to say about their wedding,
Oh,
whatever shape it takes. And by the way, the wedding bouquet, I was thinking about mine. The thing I remember about mine is that it was from Whole Foods and that my best friend who married us, she bought the bouquet, as in she went to Whole Foods and got
no,
a bunch of
not a
stuff and put
bouquet.
it together. So like I remember the colors. I don't know what type of flowers they were,
Like
but
what?
I know they were Whole Foods and they were pretty.
I love that. I would have gladly had a Whole Foods bouquet. I did not need a bouquet.
You didn't need specialty orchids that were
Yeah,
grown
I
in a
don't
lab.
yeah, I don't know anything about like, I really had no I was like, "Oh, like, orchids are nice." Like, that was, like, the extent to which I thought about it. And then it's like you get it, the invoice that's, like, itemized. I was like, "Oh, Jesus." I would have gone with
Maybe they sneakily put the cake cost in there too,
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, but no,
Well,
I really have no regrets, and it's funny, I've talked to several other folks recently who've also done versions of either micro weddings or, like, elopements. I had, close friends who eloped a couple months before we did the micro wedding, and, like, I totally get that, like, it's not for everybody, right? Some people really do have a dream of what they want their wedding to look like and what they want their wedding to be, and they want it to be big, and they wanna be surrounded by family and friends, and it's totally fine and it's awesome. And I would just say for folks who are like on the fence about it or who are curious or thinking, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna regret this after the fact?" Nobody that every single person I've talked to has said, "I am so glad that we did this." And I've even had some folks who I've talked to who got married like a little while ago who did a big wedding who said, "If we did it again today, we would do it more like how you like, we were like, we loved our wedding, it was beautiful, but it was so stressful leading up to it. We spent so much money. It was like we were all over the place, like barely even got to like enjoy the day. And I feel like with my husband and I, because we did it the way we did, because it was so small, like we really got to savor and drink up every single moment together. Um, and yeah, I'm excited to start my marriage with as the centerpiece versus a ton of stress and a ton of
and
debt.
yet yes, yes. No, I love that. I think that's a great way to end this episode because I too have asked people. I did an elopement and I've asked people who've done an elopement,
Mhm.
regrets, happy with it, and then actually my friends who had the big wedding, I've less so asked them. They've more so shared with me
Yeah.
because I had an elopement. Hey, That looks pretty cool that no one was bothering you and that you remembered everything. We actually eloped on my birthday weekend
Ah,
in 2020 in COVID, and we had already planned a socially distanced park hang with friends afterwards. So
nice.
everyone BYOB'd, champagne for a birthday
Yeah.
and had no idea that they were attending our
Wedding
wedding
party.
party.
That is so funny because we did almost the same thing, but in the reverse. I turned 30, 2 weeks before our wedding, and so I did a 30th birthday party in Miami. I had a lot of folks from Austin, a lot of different friends kind of flew out for, and we hadn't shared that we were getting married yet. And so it wasn't until like maybe like a week or two before the Miami trip that I was like, oh, by the way, we're getting married. So this is kind of like our little send off. So it's a similar thing where we got to see a lot of our friends that we really love kind of right before we left to go to Japan do the wedding. So yeah.
I love it. Well, we didn't even tell our friends that they were at our wedding party. We didn't tell anyone we had just gotten married because we hadn't told our family,
Yeah.
and we
So
felt like
yeah,
out of respect, we need to give them a heads up. But it was then funny later to tell friends like, "Oh, no,
by the way,
you attended our wedding party." They're like, "Wait, what?" Like, "You were in that park." We'd
that
had a lot of champagne. We got married that morning. So anyways, there's no wrong way to do it. The best part about it is really the person you choose.
yeah.
The rest is just good times, hopefully good memories captured with some photo documentation you can always share with family and potential family to come.
Exactly.
So, well, Savannah, thank you so much for sharing all about your micro wedding with us on the pod. Really appreciate this combo.
Yes, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, come join us in a Wealth Circle. It's our live, online, 12-week course and community where we teach you how to create a personalized financial plan alongside hundreds of other women building wealth. It will change your life and your money for good. You can apply at factorawealth.com/wealth circle. That's factorawealth.com/wealth circle. See you in the next episode.